Hey, everybody, and welcome to Redesigning the 9 to 5. I'm Tim Grieve, the executive editor of Protocol. I want to thank you for joining us, and I also want to thank Zoom for sponsoring not just today's event, but the entire launch of Protocol Workplace. We launched Workplace last week to be your guide to the new world of work. That world, our world, was already evolving rapidly before a pandemic upended everything. And now a new moment is upon us as we start to return to offices, either full-time or in a hybrid way, or maybe not at all. A moment where we have not just the opportunity, but the need to rethink everything about how we work. That's the focus of Protocol Workplace, the new ways of working, the new tools, the new skills, new regulations, and newly empowered employees who've experienced a very different kind of work life over the last year and have many ideas about how and whether they go back to the way things were before. Our Protocol Workplace team covers it all every day at protocol.com, and they break it down in a new weekly newsletter. The next edition comes out tomorrow, and you'll get it if you sign up now at protocol.com/workplace. Today's event is the first for Protocol Workplace, and it's a timely one. In a few moments, Protocol's editor-at-large, David Pierce, will host a conversation with 3 tech leaders who are all working through the questions of what the workday will look like now. But first, I want to introduce you to another tech leader, Aparna Bawa, Zoom's Chief Operating Officer and Interim Chief Legal Officer. Aparna, welcome, and thanks to you and to Zoom for sponsoring today's event.
Thank you for having me. I actually checked out the Protocol Workplace website, and the articles are spot on. Love them.
Well, great. Thanks for the endorsement. I want to start by asking you a few questions about what comes next for Zoom. The pandemic has obviously been devastating for many businesses, but it's been a really good time to be Zoom. What happens for the company now as the world goes back to work, and what's Zoom doing to remain competitive in this next phase of our work lives?
Yeah, Tim, I'd like to reframe that a little bit and just say, I think the pandemic hit us just as it hit the rest of the world. And honestly, it's been a complete privilege and an honor to be in the position where you can help people connect when they need it most, when we're not allowed to or it's not safe to. And you raise a good point. This is about a workplace for the future, and you're launching Protocol Workplace. And we believe at Zoom, and I firmly believe myself, that the workplace of the future is all about hybrid. And if I look at where Zoom is, we are positioned so well at the forefront of the transformation of the workplace, where employers, leaders, CEOs alike have realized that, I can build and lead an organization where I provide my employees a healthy level of choice and flexibility, and productivity is just not a trade-off. And, in order to do that, you need a platform to be able to leverage to provide that choice and flexibility. And Zoom is very appropriately positioned with the suite of products that we offer to do just that.
You're in a really unique position at Zoom because you're all very active users of the product that you create and that you sell. Have you and your colleagues learned things over the last 18 months as users of Zoom that have influenced how you think about Zoom in your roles as leaders of the company?
Absolutely. I think I started knowing my own product better when I started using it for myself, and I had to. But what the key things that it has impacted me, and I can also say that it's impacted my colleagues. Number one, the assumptions on where you need to hire have just gone out the window. So, for example, I am not limited by a geographic location anymore. If I have a tough to find spot and I need to hire someone for that and the best skills, I can actually go to the person. I find that my ability to stay connected with my team, with my groups, my peers, et cetera, is enhanced by I can have eye-to-eye level conversations just like this one, and still feel like I know people so well. It's been great. I would say the addition of our chat feature has been tremendous for me personally. It adds that level of spontaneity. It is the water cooler type conversation that you are able to have with the chat service. Not only can you sort of instant message, but you can see if someone is available or not, is there or not, is online, on desktop, on mobile, etc. And you just click and you just check it out, and they can pick the call up. They don't have to pick the call up, etc. But it is such a nice way of building in spontaneity into your sort of daily work life. The other thing I would say is that it has given, it has made me realize that there is a time and a place for certain types of activity. And if I can save my commute time, maybe I'm working on a big board presentation or something like that. If I can save my commute time and I can actually use that time to work from home, but I can still collaborate. I can still, if I have a question as I'm working, I can still ping someone, I can still get on a discussion, and then I can go back to that really quickly. I can really be more productive. And at the same time, we are looking forward into a hybrid workspace where for some things you do get more productivity when you're in space with each other, whether it's an ideation session for a product management team, or maybe it's an M&A deal, and you all are moving very fast and it's just more cohesive to be in the same room together. Well, our Zoom rooms, we have a product that we sell. It's the Zoom rooms, and it's the next generation conference room. And then we also have Zoom for Home, which brings you that Zoom room feel to your home for a home office. But we have really enhanced the features so that we can bridge the gap between in office and at remote workers. Things like our smart gallery feature, where everybody, even if you're in the office, what is the biggest downside of having someone dial into a meeting or join a meeting remotely while everybody else is in the office? Well, they aren't part of the conversation. Right. There's a box on the screen and you're all having your conversation. Well, with Smart Gallery, we all get put into one same sized box on the screen, and the person who is remote can also see my expressions in the same way that you can on this meeting. So I mean, all of those types of things. Our Zoom phone product will also help bridge the discussion. I've been on the phone on my mobile. I can upgrade, from Zoom phone to the meeting. It depends on the Wi-Fi, depends on sort of whatever the connection I have, maybe the cellular connection. I mean, all of these features enhance the productivity and ultimately give the employee more choice and more flexibility to really choose the type of work they are best doing for that situation. And I think that will unleash a lot of power and productivity in our modern day workforce.
And is that what you and Zoom mean when you talk about the hybrid work world actually empowering employees, as opposed to being, I think a lot of companies think of it as sort of maybe a necessary evil they have to adopt to or adapt to now that that workers have seen the other side of how work life could be.
I think you could think it that way, but I actually think there's much more promise into saying, if I empower my employees and I enhance their experience, I give them the ability to think about what they're doing and how to make it much more productive using the tools and the features that are available to them with the Zoom platform, it will unleash a lot of power across the organization. I also think it's more inclusive. I myself, I'm not gonna lie, I have thrown a load of laundry in on a call and popped back, back to my desk, and nobody knows the difference. Do you know what I'm saying? And if it saves a little bit of time for me, yes. Concept, right? If I'm a little bit, skip a step and I have a clean T-shirt on, I am happy. So, and a happier employee is a more productive employee. So I would say we are very cognizant that this is real life. Like, work is real life, and we need to be able to seamlessly provide that to people. And in the end, the organization benefits.
I bought an iron today, so I'm right there with you in understanding this transition we're going through. Just a couple other quick questions for you. How is Zoom itself internally as an employer dealing with this? Will you go back to a hybrid approach, or what will you do?
You know what? We are still in a wait and see mode. Most likely, we believe that the hybrid approach is the way to go. I mean, there's no way. We are definitely going back into a hybrid approach. What that means and how is that defined, we are still watching, and we're gauging from our own employee base. I mean, I'll just give you an example. We have an office in Sydney. We are trying to do a proof of concept. Like, we are probably going to use various locations as proofs of concepts and test out. We do a lot of feature testing for product. You do a lot of A/B testing. We should be doing A/B testing for our own employees and reacting to what they want in the time that they need it. So for example, in Australia, the situation has changed. It went from completely open to parts of Sydney being in lockdown. I think we want to be flexible. And if you asked me at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody said, oh, I don't ever want to go back into an office again. This is amazing, which is, there's a time and place for that as well.
Right.
And then as people realize, okay, well, maybe I want to have drinks with the colleague after work, or maybe I do want to, if for an M&A deal, want to sit in a conference room together and duke out the definitive agreement or negotiate the terms. Those types of things we want to accommodate for. And I think it's going to be a very contextual sort of conversation. And for us, Zoom, we know it's going to be hybrid. What form of hybrid that takes is really going to be dictated for us by our employees. And we are sort of in a wait and see pattern right now, testing a few things here and there and seeing how our employees react to them.
Yeah, and finally, last question for you is what about you? I know that you're the mother of two young boys, and I can only imagine having grown children what the last year and a half has been like. What do you think your workday is going to look like going forward?
My kids are so happy. They love mom at home, even though I'm working pretty much 10 hours a day. They think they've seen so much of me during this pandemic period. They're not happy that they can't leave the house during the height of the pandemic, but they are happy that we're all sort of in it together.
They must not be teenagers, right?
No, not yet. 12. He's on the cusp. But I would say, for me personally, I find I miss the socialization piece. And I love to see my colleagues. I love that personal interaction. I want to give people a hug. I know that sounds hokey, but I do want to give people a hug. But at the same time, I don't feel like I miss the productivity. I get enough productivity over Zoom. In fact, there are so many people that have started at Zoom, in the last 18 months that I have never met. But if you ask them, if you ask me, we would say we have extremely close relationships. I think that's the power of Zoom. You can see my facial expression. I'm a very expressive person, so I just wear it all on the face. But you can see it, so you know it. You can look into my eyes, you can see how I'm feeling, and you can see the warmth, and you can see frustration, and you can see all of the emotions that you would get in person. And so for me, it has been great. I will say, I think I have made it very, a conscious decision to get off my desk, and when it's appropriate to turn off my video, take my meeting outside, right here outside my house, and walk, because I do find myself sitting at my desk more. But as long as you're conscious of, as long as I have been conscious of what those dynamics were and sort of adjust for them, it has been wonderful. I mean, it's been a wonderful experience to work from home. Now, would I wish that I would have done it not in a pandemic and, in a much safer situation for most of the world? Absolutely.
Sure, absolutely. I think we all feel that way. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us today, and also for Zoom's sponsorship of the event. And with that, I'd like to hand things over to David Pierce, our editor at large, and my friend and colleague, who will lead the next stage of this conversation. David?
Hello. Thank you, Tim. My name is David Pierce. Like Tim said, I'm the editor at large at Protocol, and I have an extremely cool group of people here with me. So rather than, me just say nice things about you, you all get to say nice things about yourselves. So I'm just gonna have you all introduce yourselves in the order in which you are on my screen, which means Jen, you get to go first.
Lucky me. Hi, I'm Jen Grant. I'm the CEO of Appify, and I think I'm here to represent the smaller companies, and what we're going through is, a little different from the big companies like Google and Gusto, but really excited to be here and share that point of view.
Awesome. We're very glad you're here. Danielle, you get to go next.
You bet. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Brown. I'm Gusto's Chief People Officer, and I'm kind of here to represent the whole perspective of a people team who's planning for a return to work. What does that look like? What are we thinking about? How are we making those decisions?
Awesome. Very glad you're here. And last but not least, the only one of us who couldn't figure out the Zoom background, Javier, tell us who you are.
You sent me a Zoom background via SharePoint URL on an iPad. And so, you know what, I'm good at this, but not that good.
The future's complicated.
My name is Javier. Hello, David and Jen and Danielle. Great to be here with all of you. And hello to everyone listening in. My name is Javier Soltero. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Google Workspace. And I guess I'm here on behalf of a company that's making products that are enabling the future of work. And then also as the leader of a very large team, a globally distributed team that has a unique situation to both be building products to enable this, as well as experiencing the challenges rather directly. So great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, again, really, really glad to have all of you here. And just to preface all of what we're going to talk about, nobody knows anything. The future is insane. Everything's going to change all the time. But what I want to talk about is basically like what we know and sort of how we go forward, right? Even though it seems like everything has been kind of in stasis and chaos for some period of time, it's like we're reaching this time where it's like, okay, we have to keep making moves and keep pushing forward and keep trying new things. And I want to get into all of that. And Jen, I believe, as the only one of the four of us who is maybe currently in an office or has at least spent some time in an office recently, how's it going? Tell us about sort of the comeback plan and how it's been.
Totally. Yeah. If I didn't have this background, you'd see I was in our conference room. So we actually, it was just a couple of weeks ago, we kind of as a team said, hey, we're all vaccinated, let's go. And so spent a little time trying to figure out, well, what does that look like? And what does it mean? And what should the office feel like? And did a lot of work thinking through that and came back in a hybrid mode a couple of weeks ago. So we have 4 weeks of experience that I can contribute of like learnings along the way. I think there are ups, there are downs. I think it was definitely different than I expected it to be. And I think, I think what Perna said in the beginning, that this sort of, we're going to figure it out as we go. I think that's going to be fairly universal because we sort of had huge influx of energy from the employees saying, we want to get back together. We want to get back together. And so we got back together and it was great. And then there was like, well, but I got a doctor's appointment and I need someone to take care of my dogs. And the commute is really long today. And, so all of a sudden life hits and it starts to war with the enthusiasm of being together. And everyone has to sort of step back and say, well, how do I organize my life in this hybrid mode? Maybe my meetings should be on different days. Maybe I need to plan my dog care and my, doctor's appointments on different days. And it's been kind of an interesting sort of stop start, moments of joy we're together and then moments of like, oh, wow, like, how do I make this work? I haven't done this in so long.
Okay. Well, yeah. And Danielle, that's actually one of the sort of big picture questions I had for you too, because you're both thinking about this for Gusto, but also for all of Gusto's customers. And it does seem like the one thing that we know is we've all spent the last 15 months just making it work, right? And like everybody's answer has been different. The idea of when you work and when you do childcare and when you do virtual school, like everybody has just kind of cobbled together what they needed to make this work. And now coming back, it seems like some people want a return to something like normalcy, but others are saying, this flexibility works for me. And I guess like, what are you hearing even within Gusto about kind of the sort of one size fits all solution versus just like embrace chaos?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. And here's, I think, 2 things we've learned or that we know for sure. I think the first is that we know the world has changed and flexibility is going to be a key part of the way we all work going forward. And just as you said, the second thing, it's very clear that one size fits all isn't going to cut it. As we have been listening to our employees over the last 18 months, what they told us is what works for some is very different than what works for others. We've got folks that are absolutely thriving being remote, that love it. We've got folks that can't wait to get back into the office a few days a week. So as we've been designing our return to office plans, we've really used kind of 2 principles to guide our decision-making. The first is empowerment, really meeting people where they're at in terms of their life, their location, and doing our best to empower them to make some choice within kind of a framework. And we kind of couple that empowerment with intentionality. We do want to make sure, and we still think it's important to be intentional about how we collaborate, the kind of culture we build. So what we've done is we've created 3 different work style personas. We call them remote, flex, and in-office. Pretty straightforward. And it's just as it sounds. Remote Gusties, as we call our employees, will be more or less fully remote, and remote is their default kind of work style, maybe coming into the office a couple times a year for those special moments that matter. In office is just what it sounds like. It's a really small percentage of our team whose jobs are really all about supporting our physical infrastructure, maybe your physical security, or you work at our front desk. And then the majority of our Gusties today are going to be what we call flex. So a couple days in the office, the rest of the week, work from wherever you want. Maybe that's the office, maybe it's your house, maybe it's the coffee shop. What we did do with our Flex Gusties, though, is worked kind of team by team to figure out how do we make sure we coordinate those days so teams that collaborate together are actually going to be in the office spending time together. And so that's how we're sort of starting this up. These personas, we communicated them all to our Gusties back in May. We wanted people to know kind of what personas their role was eligible for and time to make choices about which they wanted to choose. And then those personas are going to come into effect in mid-September, which is the date we're kind of targeting for our offices to be fully available. And I will say right now, we've started a phased optional reopening of our offices. So folks who have been wanting to get back can start going back and testing it out. And it's just as Jen said, we've seen people really adjusting to, what is it like? How do I structure my schedule? How do I rethink work? And so it's been a good option as we phase back in.
I really like the concept of like super intentional planned flexibility, where it's like we are going to be rigid in our flexibility. Like it seems like kind of where all of this is headed. That makes sense to me. Javier, what about you? You run a pretty big, pretty distributed team, but like Google as a whole has always been a very sort of office-centric place. How are you thinking about this stuff right now?
Well, like I mentioned a minute ago, we have almost a 3-layered responsibility, right? Like we are supporting Google in its own journey of enabling hybrid work, which we've been, I think, pretty public about our intention to not back away from our commitment to the facilities and the employee experience that is such a key part of making Google such a special place and enabling our employees to be able to innovate and create new and exciting things, but also to support our customers, millions of organizations around the world, ranging from small businesses and individuals all the way out to large multinationals and their journey on the path to, whatever we want to call what's next, whether it's hybrid work or the future of work or whatever. And then in the middle of that, of course, is our own team. So we did something pretty interesting, for the organization that I lead, which is called Communication and Collaboration. We run Workspace along with all the other communication and messaging products at Google. Most flexible policy for remote and hybrid work, similar to what Danielle mentioned for Gusto. We have people that are going to choose, a significant number of people really are eager to go back in the office. Some people that are going to embrace the level of flexibility of being in the office a certain number of days a week, and then being remote a few other days. And then we're going to support people that want to be fully remote. And in the middle of that is some interesting challenges and ultimately opportunities for how do you preserve a sense of organizational connection, and not just address the question of meetings, which is sort of a meaty topic, and that's the most natural place. Like we look at it. Danielle mentioned personas. We're looking at it from the point of view of almost recipes, saying what types of, you gather people together for what purpose, and what's generally the structure of these, and whether everyone's physically together and they're there to work on something. In other words, you need collaborative surfaces, you're building documents, you're drawing on whiteboards, digital or otherwise. You also have more broadcast meetings, right? Like all hands meetings or meetings involving one or very few people sharing a lot out to others. And then, 2 or 3 things in between. And so using the unique opportunity that we have, given, we serve over 3 billion people around the world with these products, observe carefully how are they actually best capable of helping people stay connected, not just by being on calls or even being able to respond to chat messages, but in between all the things that happen. How do you actually foster a sense of human connection, honestly, for a team that's distributed? I think, similar to what Aparna mentioned at the beginning, I joined Google before the pandemic, but it was, I think, 3 months before. You and I, David, met right before we were all sent home. So I still have not sat physically with the leadership team of our organization, and it lends itself to some pretty interesting moments. Like nowadays, when in the off chance that I actually run into somebody, I realize, oh, this person is incredibly tall, and you sort of it's a very weird transition. So we'll be experiencing that, but looking very specifically at like, how do you preserve a sense of connection, and how do you guide people to, not just by providing them tools, like how does the social contract that governs the way a company functions get updated to reflect the flexibility that people are taking advantage of more and more.
Okay. Well, and one thing you just said that I want to follow up on, and I think my guess is all three of you have experienced this too, is that it seems like we're in this position where thinking about hybrid work is way less about work, right? Like there was this thing at the beginning a few months ago where there was questions of, we all have to be in the same room to do collaboration, and it's about running into each other at the water cooler. And I think to the extent that that's true, and it is true to some extent, it's not the whole story, but it seems like what we're trying to figure out is much less about like, how do people accomplish their deliverables every day, and how do we foster team building and make people feel like they work for a company and understand the vision and are like all pulling in the same direction. Is that like, when we talk about the future of work, is that sort of the biggest open question right now, rather than like, how do we get all the work done every day?
I would say yes and no. So now that we've been in it, there is still a question of getting the work done. And I think that is specifically towards the more junior employees. So what we've seen is there are plenty of people who have, 15 years of experience in what they're doing, rock on, remote, they know what they need to do, and they're off and running. But we've seen over the last year that our more junior employees haven't ramped as fast as they could have, were they sitting next to their team. And kind of that hearing, especially in sales, hearing someone else on a call, hearing them deal with an objection, all of that learning is missed. And so then, the question out there for the workplaces and the Zooms and, all these folks is, how do you create that kind of sales team floor feeling with the energy and with the learning that just happens? So I would say that's one area where I have stepped back and said, wow, this is actually a how do we don't know how to be as successful virtually for those situations and for those sort of, newer employees that are really still learning what they're doing. On the flip side, 100%, the more experienced folks, like they're off and running. Do they need to be in the office? I don't know. And so I think back to, when were the moments when I thought to myself, good God, we need to get back to the office? And it was always around sort of energy, motivation, when things are hard, when there's, we have a week where maybe we lose a deal that we were all working on, like that moment of like, when you're in the office, you can manage that as a leader. You can say, it's all right, guys, we got this one, we got this one, we got this one, we're going to move on from this. And 6 months from now, they'll wish they went with us. Like that kind of like energy and motivation is very hard to do over Zoom. And I would say the third piece that I really kind of have reflected on and said, it is, as a leader of, you get 50 people on a Zoom, et cetera, you guys are larger companies, so even more people on a Zoom. When you are doing an all hands and presenting, there is very little feedback from the audience. And so it is very difficult to know whether you're landing the message. And, you look at the different possible video, the only thing I saw was a little company called High Five had a nice little feature where I was telling a joke in a particular presentation and all these little laughy hearts started flying across my screen. And I was like, oh, feedback, like I'm feeling it. Like they heard what I said. They weren't just, doing their laundry and had me on as background noise. So I think, there are some specific things that we haven't solved that, I think what's going to happen is all these companies are going to go back. They're going to say hybrid. And then there's going to be a shift where all of a sudden everyone's going to say, wait a minute, is really hybrid going to work for me? Is it, maybe I prefer being remote? And the leadership is going to say, oh, well, crap, what do we do now? Like we had leaned into hybrid to solve the training problem, to solve the feedback problem, and to solve this kind of connection energy problem. And we don't have solutions for those things yet. So going back to fully remote is a little scary. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, but we're starting to see, we were excited about going back, but today we're not, but maybe tomorrow we will be. So it's not a an obvious answer for any of it.
Makes sense. Danielle, you were just nodding a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll share kind of our experience, which is a little different than the experience Jen's described, which I think goes to show it's not one size fits all. We actually, in the very early days, were worried about, is there going to be a big productivity tax that we're seeing when our employees are fully remote and distributed? And we actually have not seen a big gap or a tax on productivity. In fact, our Gusties are incredibly productive. But what we are seeing is kind of what you hit on, David, like the specialness, the community, the culture, the connectedness, kind of how it feels to be part of our workspace and our workplace. And I think what's interesting is sometimes we get in this place where we think every problem is a new problem. And the truth is, this is something we were grappling with long before the pandemic, because we had teams spread across offices in New York and Denver and San Francisco. And even in Denver, we had a multi-building campus. So you'd have people joining meetings from different buildings and different floors and different conference rooms. And so I think that some of these problems that we've been grappling with a long time, and we don't always need to kind of reinvent the wheel, right? I think it's about thinking about how do you optimize every experience that you have for a remote and distributed workplace? Is it changing the meeting practices and the norms you have? Is it about kind of building an intentional footprint across offices in your remote locations? Is it leaders rotating their time between offices? Is it pivoting some of our programs to be more virtual first? So definitely some of these problems are new and we're grappling, but some of them we've been thinking about for a long time. And it does, for me, definitely come back to culture, community, connectedness, more so than productivity, which did surprise us a little bit in the beginning.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So since we're talking about meetings, let's talk about meetings, because the thing that I have heard over and over from people is that like remote meetings have been mostly terrible and hybrid meetings are going to be even worse. And Javier, let's start with you, because this is like you run Google Meet. This is something you're spending a lot of time thinking about. There is this sort of big, beautiful future where everybody like redesigns their conference room and spends thousands of dollars on new cameras and new screens. And it's like this amazing holodeck kind of situation. But like, that's not realistic for most people, maybe ever, certainly not now. So like in the sort of here and now, like what's your sense of kind of how Meet and Zoom and other tools can be used, or how we can just do better meetings this way? What are you learning?
Well, if it's sort of a similar answer than years ago, you and I talked about email, and I was in the process of trying to build a better email experience, and I think I told you less email is better email, right? Like the association with volume and a need for connectedness, and particularly using video calling. It's understandable that in a time when we are actually absolutely starved of human connection and real contact for those outside of our immediate families, that we would reach for all kinds of tools and any option to be able to see people and yes, react to their facial expressions and everything else. But we have, I think, gone over a tipping point here where, in fact, I was talking to somebody the other day who was complaining about this and said, I was trying to set up a call with my accountant, and he said, hey, let's jump on a video call. And he's like, we did it for years over the phone. Like, why? We don't need to see each other. Like, this isn't, in a way, and it's actually, it's as many studies have shown, like psychologically exhausting. We're not really suited for this. So I'd say that the answer starts with, and even before the pandemic, like no one really loves missing. I'm going to work and boy, I'm going to spend all day in meetings, said no one ever, right? Like, regardless of the sophistication and holodecks, we've got those, by the way, which is cool. You'll see it in person. I'll look forward to showing you that. But the real issue, and actually the real problem, I think, with a hybrid approach, regardless of what recipe is followed or how people are, what we're really focused on is the equity issue. The disadvantage that people naturally would be in a world where there are people who can actually take full advantage of regular in-person contact, serendipitous meetings, richer conversations, hey, let's go grab a coffee, all those types of things, and those who do not. And there's a meetings aspect to this, which is side conversations, are those actually captured in a meeting? Like, is everyone like, what are the rules of the road to make sure that regardless of who's there or not, everyone gets to participate? And we're very invested in this. We announced a few months ago something called companion mode. You have to accept the fact that not every conference room is going to get retrofitted with the most sophisticated technology, and actually build the solution, at least from the way we're approaching it, taking into account not only the technology people already have at their disposal, but also the habits they already have. In this particular case, the habit everyone has to check their email and be not quite fully focused and attentive in a meeting, and therefore actually use that opportunity to have people with their laptops or mobile devices or whatever in front of them to say, let's turn this into a device that can complement the experience for the benefit of those who might not be in the room, and slowly but surely set a new social norm and a new level of connection, I guess, or new opportunities for connection that put everyone on equal footing in meetings. However, that is just one small part. I think you go upstream from this and realize, well, our meetings, is every meeting actually necessary? Google in this way has been eye-opening for me, having worked at a bunch of other places. There's a culture of reflection and introspection on whether the gathering of people, whether virtually or physically, is actually really necessary. And you will definitely get called out at Google if you go gather up a bunch of people and you're like, well, it's great to see everyone. Like, meetings there are 30 minutes, which is another. These are all elements, by the way, of the social contract. It's never documented. Maybe it's an interesting exercise, maybe for companies like Gusto, to encourage companies in their path to being more deliberate about how they want this to play out and how they want this to be a reflection of their particular company culture. Because Gusto is different from Google. Google is different from PwC or Carrefour or any of these different companies out there. To tell people, what is it that you're looking to describe that actually captures the things the way your company functions, all the way down to like meeting etiquette and what types of communication vehicles are appropriate. How do people actually make themselves available or not available? Like we reduce this down to three things. The things we've learned about the future of work. First of all, what you do is no longer seamlessly and tightly coupled with where you do it, whether that is work or being a student or running a home business, whatever. Second, time and attention management becomes an even more important skill. It was always important. There's no shortage of technology options, products, devices, or whatever that are calling to us, but your ability as an individual to actually manage your time, which is something that we're all spectacularly not great at, even for the GTD crowd out there, that is incredibly crucial. And it's also crucial for an organization. An organization whose individual people don't manage their time and attention well is also going to be equivalently disorganized and chaotic and not productive and effective. And then lastly, to acknowledge the fact that what makes amazing things and difficult things actually happen in life is a real sense of connection among humans, which is, I will say, as somebody who's deeply invested in the video calling space, is, we'll say, nearly impossible to truly achieve via video call. We should not, we can throw a lot of innovation and energy at it, and certainly Google is all in on that. However, we all can attest to the fact that the necessary human connection that enables a child to learn how to read, or a group of people distributed around the world to potentially launch spacecraft into orbit, and really everything in between, isn't strictly possible without some really meaningful level of trust, which you can't build transactionally from one video call to another, right? And we're putting Workspace solely on that journey of addressing that and getting feedback from people to figure it out.
I like that. Danielle, what do you make of the idea that you should be responsible for, coming up with the perfect hybrid work Bible? Because like I joke, but like it's a thing people want, right? Like I talk to so many people who are like, I don't know how any of this is supposed to work. Just tell me, just give me answers, give me something I can start with. You seem like a good person to do it. Can you just sort of write us the hybrid work playbook and like neatly solve everybody's problem? That'd be great.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy. No, I think it's going to take us some time to learn. And there's a couple things that kind of come to mind here. I think we do have to separate kind of what normal remote and normal hybrid work is going to look like when we're not kind of in the crisis mode of a pandemic. So you've heard this a lot, right? We're not just working from home, we're working in the middle of a global pandemic. And so people are stressed, people are burnt out, people are caring for sick folks, or they're sick themselves, or they're stressed or worried. And so I do think really thinking about, have we all been working under our best conditions? What happens when we get to a better sense of normalcy, and how's that going to look different than it did the past 18 months is going to be huge. I also think, and Jen, you described this as you all started getting back into the office, right? It's just going to be a little funky for a while. We've adjusted to one way of working. Now we're going to think about another one. And we've kind of coined a term internally at Gusto. I've got to thank one of my environment team leaders for this. He called it give grace and give space. And that's literally our mantra about everything we're doing is give grace, give space, be willing to listen, be willing to learn, not be too rigid. We've got all these ideas of how it's going to work. We might get back and realize a lot of it doesn't work. And you've got to be willing to kind of throw it out the window and adjust and learn. And I think really listen to people. So can I write a workplace Bible? Nope. I can write guidelines that change all the time, that we're agile and responsive to. And I think the big key is not going to be getting married to any one way of doing things, and kind of be willing to let these things unfold and evolve a little bit.
Yeah. And to that point, actually, Jen, it's, I was describing it to somebody the other day as I've forgotten how to be a person, which is going to make it really interesting when I end up going back to an office. But Jen, I'm curious from your perspective, how you think about sort of measuring this stuff. Like, you've been back in an office for a few weeks. Is it working? Is it good? Like, how do you know? How do we even go about trying to figure out what answers are? And you can sort of see if the work is still getting done, but these other things feel sort of softer in a lot of ways. Like, how are you thinking about actually analyzing this stuff?
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent question, because you can always look at like the traditional KPIs of, are we closing deals? Is the product doing well? Are we launching new features? All the things that you would normally watch as any company would be watching. And, those are all doing the same things that they were doing before. So like, okay, those things are fine. But you're right. It's, as we came back to the office, I think my initial, to be quite honest, my initial assumption was like, this is great. We've thought of everything. Like, this hybrid thing is what people want. And, we've been flexible. Everyone says, this is my day and I'm going to be there, these 2 and these 3. And, it seemed like everyone was in, and it would work perfectly, but it didn't. It was like, wait, oh, that doesn't quite work. I said I would be here on Mondays, but actually I dropped my kids off on Monday morning. So that's not going to work. So let's rethink that. And so obviously, going back to what Danielle says, it's a constant flux. And as far as being able to say, is it working or not, I don't actually know if there is like a metric that I can point to. What I end up doing is going back and just talking to the team and saying, okay, step back. How's it going? Or, in the one-on-ones, almost every one-on-one I have is like, so what's working? What's not working? Like, I know, like, I'm the big bad boss, but tell me, like, what's really working? Like,
you find that people know, because it seems like part of the weird time that we're in right now is like Danielle was saying, everything is still so in flux. We're in the midst of this pandemic thing that isn't going to last forever. Like, do you find people are pretty sort of clear-headed about how they wish things could be better?
Sometimes, like, I think the people who are more experienced, or who have kids, who are constantly thinking about like, how do I organize my day? Because I have 18,000 things to do with kid pickup and a doctor's appointment and whatnot. They tend to be a little bit more ahead of the curve. I'm a big proponent of people with kids. They're super awesome, myself included, because you just have to organize. You can't get away with the extra 30 minutes of, oh my gosh, I forgot a child somewhere. It was done. But I think folks that are new to the workforce don't know what they want. We had one employee that was like so excited to get back together. And as soon as the first day showed up, she got nervous. And she was like, well, I don't know, this commute seems really far and I've never been on the train. And, and all of a sudden things came up for her that she didn't expect at all. And so then we had to say, okay, well, no worries. We got Zoom, we got ways to communicate. Like, we'll check in tomorrow and see, and talk through what's going on for you. So I do think it's fairly individual, and it's fairly kind of team, getting each team to decide, this is working, this is not working. So, I can't say I certainly have all the answers, but I do think it is checking in and talking to people individually, because their opinions are changing every week. I think people are starting to adjust back into, oh, is this my forever hybrid days in the office? Am I going to move everything for this? Or is this like, and in our case, so as a small company, sometimes our decisions are based on the fact that we have a lease that goes 10 more months. So like, heck, we're gonna have to pay for this dumb thing. Let's make it awesome and see if we can make hybrid work. But we have a timer on the whole, experiment. Like, we have a little, at some point, I will need to step back and say, okay, guys, did you like the hybrid? Because here's how much it costs. And we could go fully remote. And I can tell you, that's like, we could hire another employee for that amount. So like, those are the trade-offs we're making. How much productivity did it increase over the last 10 months will matter when the lease comes up and we have to make that decision.
Yeah, Javier, speaking of timelines, you're in an interesting position of having to make kind of a lot of those same decisions Jen is talking about, but also having to like come up with product roadmaps. And I would assume it would be very tempting to say, by September 15th, we will have decided what this is going to look like, and we're just going to pick something and go with it. But I'm assuming that would end badly for you. Like, how are you thinking about sort of the timelines for all this?
So the timeline, there are multiple timelines, let's say. In fact, this past week, we just recently announced that, at least in the Bay Area, we're going to starting July 12th, we're going to allow on a voluntary basis people to start coming back into the office with certain, processes in place for vaccinated people and people that need to get tested and so forth. The way I think about the timeline is it's going to go very slowly, and then it's going to go very fast. Yes, there is sort of you have to put a marker and say, Google had publicly announced by September, we would be all sort of back into whatever the sort of normal mode of operation is at the majority of our offices. But again, we have a global team. So I have a large team in India. They are in a very different situation than the team here in the West Coast. My team in the Pacific Northwest is dealing with apparently like the most epic heat wave in recent history. Like these are complex times. So you can set markers for, it's a journey no matter what. And actually it's a journey that started before the pandemic for us. Luckily, like one of the interesting parts of my job is that the products that I have the privilege of leading are, we're actually putting companies and individuals on a path to enabling exactly what we just went through long before we ever thought it would happen, right? And so when I think about the things we have to put in place, both for our customers and for Google, quickly we know what those are. It's things like companion mode, as well as continued enhancements to our broader portfolio to rely less on scheduled meetings and everyone sort of dealing with each other transactionally. Because when everyone's remote, you could do certain things, and they're not great, by the way. Like hopping from one call to another is not that great. And so my biggest fear, honestly, is that in that sort of, it's going to go very slowly and then it goes very fast. And it goes to something Jen mentioned about sort of talking to individuals and assessing their situation and helping guide them in some cases, is the fallback case. I have this, this sense that as soon as people start coming back into offices, certainly ours at Google, in larger quantities, that it's going to be important to remind them that we have an opportunity to approach things a little differently, because if not, they're just going to end up the first sign of friction and uncertainty, especially for us, since there's so much thought and investment placed into the employee experience at Google, that, when people come back, they're going to say, wait a minute, like everything is back to normal. And so I settled right back into the same bad habits. It's amazing how, as painful and instructive and long as this experience has been, I'm sure that a lot of people will just, collapse back into, that's right, it's January 2020 all over again. Some companies have actually explicitly decided that is the plan, that there is no hybrid work, that basically once we turn the page, we're good. And I think that's where these equity problems start showing up, because that won't happen. There will still be a bunch of people that are going to be trying to make something different happen. And if you don't have critical mass and you don't remind people, maybe the last thing I'll say is, it's not the employer's strict only responsibility to create that and figure it all out. There's too much uncertainty here. We've made it clear to people in my organization anyway, that in order for this hybrid approach, our hybrid approach in CNC to work, it requires commitment from leadership, from managers, and from individuals to make it work and to encounter uncertainty and work with us to figure it out, provide feedback, be constructive, treat it as the innovation opportunity that it is, and not be like, why haven't you solved this problem for me? Because, some cases you're going to run into issues you can't solve.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Danielle, on the point of thinking about the folks who kind of want to go back to January 2020, one of the things that I've heard anecdotally is that there's a sense that for companies who can be more flexible and can offer hybrid work, that's going to start to become a real advantage. And that, like, if I can get, roughly the same job at roughly the same kind of company for roughly the same amount of money, and one will let me live near my family and one is going to force me to live in Soma, that becomes a real tiebreaker. Do you think that's real?
1,000%. We're definitely seeing that as we are out in the market talking to prospective candidates. They value that flexibility. They value the hybrid office setup, or that is a choice. It's been amazing as an employer to be able to hire from a bigger talent pool in more cities, reach people that might not have thought about Gusto before based on where they live. So I definitely think that's going to be a consideration.
What kind of questions are job prospects asking that maybe they weren't before on that front?
Yeah, all the things that we've talked about, right? What are my options for coming into an office? Do I have the option to be remote? Do I have opportunities for career development and advancement if I'm at this place or that place? What does training look like? How does my team get together to collaborate? It's all of those topics that we've touched on that we are finding we need to have the answers for to recruit and attract great talent.
Got it. Okay. And what about for you, Jen? Are you finding the same thing as you're trying to build the team?
Absolutely. And I think being able to say, we just hired this amazing guy out of Florida, and being able to say yes to that is hugely impactful for the business, especially when at our size, where every single employee needs to be amazing. And if they are, it can add so much to the business and, being able to grow and to develop this team. And so it has definitely, like Danielle was saying, like all of a sudden we are thinking about anybody, any place as being a place where we could get a great employee with the experience that, that we need for whatever that position is. And I think that, like, ongoing, that sort of balance, like Javier was saying, that balance of, well, here are the people, that are remote, and here are the people that are hybrid, and well, what if they change their mind and they want to be remote? And how do we make that something that's fair, so that no one feels like, well, I had to come in today, but that guy didn't. And so those are the kind of conversations that we have going on right now to figure out, like, how do we make sure that everyone feels that they have a voice in this sort of contract of where you work and how you get your work done, so that we can come back and say, okay, yes, you can be remote, and here are the things that we need from you to make that work. And so my hope is we'll end up in a better place.
Do you find yourself pitching Appify differently than you might have? Because I think for so many years, there was this very romantic idea of working at a small company that was like, we're a small team. We're going to spend all our time together. We're going to eat pizza in the office.
We're going to sleep in the office.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that was probably always terrible, but it was it was romanticized in a certain way. Like,
yeah.
Does the sales pitch change when it's like, come work here, but do it from Florida?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think we talk more about the people themselves versus the location. It's funny you said that. I was very early at Box.net, and Box.com, was what we became. And the very first office was, there were a couple of people sleeping upstairs, and like had to walk through one of the conference rooms to get to the bathroom. So like, it was a real critical time in the company, and very weird. And so, like, how do you hire, a 40-plus-year-old woman with kids when there's young people walking around in a towel because the bathroom is right through the conference room. So it's like a different atmosphere. And now we have the opportunity to say, it's not necessarily about, the grimy, dirty sort of like, we're going to make this startup work and we're going to sleep and work 24 hours a day. And it becomes much more like, these are great, smart people, and we're all putting our best brains towards the solution. And it isn't about like, we're going to kind of stay here for 12 hours and sleep on the couch and, and that kind of sort of, maybe that's the old school Silicon Valley. That's sort of which, to be honest, let's be fair, that's the young person Silicon Valley. Once you hit a certain age, you don't really want to sleep on a couch. That's not really where I am in my career.
Yeah.
So I think, it does create it's like a strange professionalism for a startup that isn't stuffy, but is more like the acknowledgement that work and life are both important and you have to have them both to be successful. And we're going to work together to make that fun. And the office then becomes more of a gathering place. Like when we had to design the office when we moved back in, and it's not cubicles and it's not walls and it's like, well, because when we're here, because we're not always here, you don't need to put the headphones on and just jam. You can do that at home. When we're here, we're getting together. We're going to go sit on the couch and talk, and we're going to get a pizza and sit in the middle of the room and, talk about lunch and what's going on in our lives. And it's that connection is much more about what the office means to us today.
I like it. Okay, so I am going to let all of you go here in a minute, but I have one more question and you all have to answer. And then you can't leave until you do. And that question is, what is the correct number of days to be in the office every week? You don't have to say for the whole industry. You don't have to say for your company, just for you, like life in your happy place. What is the number of days you want to be in the office? And we'll go in reverse order. I made you introduce yourself. So Javier, you're up first.
I mean, the cop-out answer is as many as are necessary to get the things done.
Nope. The only allowable answers are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's it.
So speaking for me in my weird role, it's probably 2 to 3, and mostly about going and visiting different offices and visiting with teams. There's no point in me going into the office to participate in a video call. And since all our teams are distributed anyway, it's very unlikely that I would be able to have a call without at least some even before the pandemic, without some portion of people being remote. So the real point is, as Jen mentioned, like opportunities to build connection, work on things directly, and generally 2 to 3 days per week at various sites would be ideal for me.
I like it. Danielle, what about you?
Yep, my ideal is 2 to 3 days a week. I'm going to start with 2, and I'm going to use my own mantra: give grace, give space, see how it goes.
I like it. Jen, what about you?
I like that a lot, by the way. That give grace, give space thing is actually super on point.
I agree.
Great.
Yeah, I think if you had asked me before we came back, I would have said 3, and I will change my opinion and say it's 100% 2. I can't, and I'm seeing that across the board with everyone. Like 2 days, you get all this great interaction, you get the meetings done, and you're almost a little socially tired. Like, oh, I'm gonna go like actually do the list of things I created in these last 2 days, and I'm gonna go just jam, and I can do it faster at home when I can stick my headphones on and just go. So we'll see. I will predict that everyone will come back, they will go 3 days hybrid, and then they will move to 2.
I like it. That's 2 is my sweet spot too. So I'm glad we're all kind of on the same page.
And offices throughout the world will be empty on Fridays.
Exactly. No one is working on a Friday.
Those are the times to sublease the space, Jen. Like Fridays, for parties, whatever people want to do at the Appify shop, they can do.
Right. We should like host events, or I don't know.
It's a business idea for like Uber, but for unused Friday office.
Uber for Friday. Friday office space. I'm on
pretty
it.
Good. That's pretty good. You heard it here first. All right, awesome. Well, listen, thank you all so much for doing this. This was incredibly fun. I'm really grateful, and I look forward to seeing all of you in your offices some Tuesday or Wednesday in the very near future. Thank you all. Thanks to everyone who watched, and we'll see you again soon.